So my talk, the title I was given was OpenStreetMap as Mature Open Linked Data, and that's what I'm going to try and set out for you this afternoon. So the issue that many people face is that it's Google is the very dominant, almost monopolistic online map for a lot of things, and OpenStreetMap offers an alternative to that. Unlike Google, it's not driven by commercial factors, and we think that in the OpenStreetMap community that the quality is a lot better. So side by side here is a screenshot of an area near where I live, Perry Bar in North Birmingham, in OpenStreetMap on the left, or rather using OpenStreetMap data on the left, and Google on the right. And just to give you a couple of little pointers, I mean, you look at the level of detail in terms of the pass through the park, Perry Hall Park or playing fields, which is sort of center left. You can see there's just a big green blob on Google, but on OpenStreetMap we have paths and trees marked out. Same with Witten Cemetery. If you zoom into that, it's still green on Google, but on OSM you get all the individual paths and the chapels and so on. And you can see plastered all over Google adverts for commercial premises like the wibbly wobbly world of play, which sounds very funny, until you realize it's next door to the crematorium. So if you're a bereaved person looking to use the crematorium, then unfortunately that's what you get presented with. It's not very subtle. And neighborhood alarm systems, who are also on the Google map, are a very good company. They do my burglar alarm, but it's somebody's home. There's no premise there, so it's absolutely no use to you for navigation, and you'd never want to go there on business. So a little bit of difference there between OSM or Google. So what is OSM? Well, OpenStreetMap, despite the name, is not a map. And just to be clear, I put that in bold and italics and underlined it in red. I can't emphasize that point enough. OpenStreetMap is not a map. OpenStreetMap does not exist to provide an online map like Google Maps. What it is a collection of these. This is highly magnified, but that is a point. In other words, it's, in OpenStreetMap terms, it's a node. It's a single geographical point with a set of coordinates. And like many map services, including Google Maps and others, we use the WGS84 datum. So it's not the Ordnance Survey one. This is an international project that operates all around the world. And WGS84 is the standard datum. So that's the coordinates that we use. And each of those points in OpenStreetMap, and there are millions of them, is identified by a pair of coordinates that allows you to place it geographically on the planet Earth. And we treat these nodes in different ways. So if I go back, sorry, you can have an individual node that can represent, I don't know, a letterbox or a tree or an antenna or a fire hydrant or any single small object like that you really wouldn't map as a two-dimensional object. You'd just put a point on the map and say, here it is. And you can use those nodes for bigger objects. So if you don't have the time to map your home, you could just put a node and say, this is 41 High Street, any town, and the postcode is such and such, and you can put it on a node and it will still appear. But we can also link nodes together. And when we do that in a linear way, they can represent a road or a river or a stream or a footpath or anything like that. And where the arrows between them have directions, that can be used to represent things like the flow of a river or an uphill footpath or ramp or whatever it might be. So that's a linear way where we link nodes one to the other, and the way has two end nodes. And of course, linear nodes can cross each other, so you can get crossroads and level crossings on railways, and they can bifurcate or conjoin like rivers and streams do. We also link ways together in polygons, and the commonest polygon, of course, is a square or a rectangle. That's most people's houses or an office block or any object that you like that. And we can have irregular polygons that can be field boundaries or ornate buildings or counties or countries or oceans or lakes or anything where there's no end point, where it's all joined up. So that's a polygon way. And the other type of ways that we have are multi-polygons. So we use these to represent objects with a hole in, like a polo min. So this could be a building with a courtyard, or it could be a lake with an island, or indeed an island with a lake. We can have three-level multi-polygons like that. Anything where you have a donut shape, effectively. So those are the three types of ways And then the other type of object that we map in OpenStreetMap using all these nodes and ways are relations. So any number of nodes, ways of various types, polygons, linear ways, whatever, can be grouped into a relation. So a relation might be all the buildings on a university campus, even though there's a road going through the middle of them that is not part of the university. It might be all the sculptures that make up one particular artwork. In linear way terms, it might be all the roads that make up a bus route. We use them a lot for public transport. And those are relations. In other words, they're sets of ways of one type or another. And any of those objects, whether it's a node, a way, or a relation, is addressable by a URI. So the URI on this page, which is for a way, you can see in the URI the word way, and ending in 079, that number at the end that ends 079, represents the Hall of Memory, which is the pictured building in Birmingham, which is one of our war memorials, and one of my favorite buildings, which is why I've picked it. And every object is tagged. So we allocate string values to those objects, and I put some examples in here with values. So the name tag has the value Hall of Memory. The building tag has the value historic, and we could have building hospital, building school, building residential, or just building yes if we're not clear about the type. And the listed status tag has the value of grade 2 in this case, because it is a protected building by English heritage. Sorry, by historic England, I should say these days. And each of those object tag values can be treated as a triple. So for way 079, the name equals Hall of Memory is a triple, which those of you who deal with linked data will mean something. So from that URI, you can collect all the triples relating to that object in a variety of ways, and then you can process them using a computer to do all sorts of things, not necessarily to show them on screen as a map. So here's a news flash for you. What is OpenStreetMap? OpenStreetMap is a database. It is a set of geospatial data. And those data can be used to draw a map, as I showed you earlier, or for other things. So that's a very important point. It is not a map. However, there is a map. If you go to openstreetmap.org, you will see something that looks like this. This is, again, the area of Peribar near where I live that I showed you earlier. And this is full screen in the OpenStreetMap main website. And the reason this map exists primarily is to help the people who are contributing to the map to check that what they've done is correct. So it is there for people to use if they want to navigate their way around somewhere or to show other people, but that's not its primary purpose. So it doesn't have a lot of the bells and whistles like route finding and what have you that Google Maps or similar maps have. But what it does have is it's editable. So in the top right there, you can see that you can log in, or indeed you can sign up for an account if you don't already have one and then log in. Excuse me. And once you've logged in, you can edit the data via this map. You can select an object in the map and change the tags for it. Now, I'm not going to teach you to do that today. Happy to teach you some other time if anybody's interested, but take it from me that once logged in, this map is editable, and then you will see the results displayed on this screen, and you can zoom in and scroll around just like any other Slippy map, and you can choose a particular view and then share it. So if you want to show your friends this is where the party is on Friday night, or this is where our office is, you can send a link to a page on this map and it's good enough for those purposes. And because it is under an open license, you can take a screenshot of this screen for your own view, wherever you might be, and you can draw on it and then put it on your own website as a static image. You know, here's where our office is, here's where the party is, whatever it might be. So it's open and reusable in that sense. So there is a map at openstreetmap.org, but it's not there to replace Google Maps. It's there for testing and development purposes mainly. In fact, there are not one, but many maps. So there are different ways of viewing the map I just showed you by changing the skin or the style sheet for it. And there are other maps hosted by partner organizations or people within the OpenStreetMap movement for different purposes. So if I just snip back a moment, you can see the motorways here. You've got Spaghetti Junction or Gravelly Hill Interchange in the bottom right are pink, because this is an international map that uses international legends. But in the UK, we paint our motorways blue. So somebody's redrawn the map there, emphasized some slightly different features, and made the motorways blue. That's a fairly simple change that you can make to the data and render it in your own way. And for those of you who don't know about online mapping, this is all done through tiles. So you run the data through a tiling engine. You can write your own, or there are others you can use. And you can then set the styles and produce tiles, which are the little square images that as you scroll around a map like OpenStreetMap or Google Map, come into view and disappear from view, or indeed as you zoom in and out. So you need a set of tiles. If you want a map of the world on your website, you need all the tiles for the world. But if you just want a map of North Birmingham or wherever you happen to live, you can just upload the tiles for that area or render your own tiles or use tiles from a third-party tile server. And there are lots of people making tiles available either free or commercially, depending on the volume that you need. So there's one rendering. Here's another rendering of the same area. This is done for cyclists. So the roads are less important, or rather the motorways are less important, but the cycle route that runs north to south down the right-hand side as a hash line is highlighted in red. So for a cyclist, that's much more useful than a map highlighting the motorways. This is another map some friends and I did quite a few years ago now. This is a map of the gritting routes in Birmingham. So red are the routes that are gritted first when it snows or freezes. Blue are the secondary routes that are done when the temperature drops further. And of course, that's useful if you're sitting at home and you need to go out late at night on a frosty night. You don't necessarily want the shortest road, you want the one that's safest. So you might look for the ones that are being gritted. This is another map using the same data again that's been done by an organization, I think it was a trade body in the brewing industry. So the little red and yellow icons are breweries and pubs, subject close to my heart. And if you click on one of those icons on their map, you get this little pop-up. Now, some of that data is OpenStreetMap data, so the name and the address and possibly the website. But the type that it's a large brewery and the reference number is not in OpenStreetMap. That's in the database of the company or organization who produced this map. So you can mash up OpenStreetMap data in your own map into an interactive map, and there are various tools to allow you to do that. This is a rendering of all the railways around Birmingham, not just North Birmingham, but the whole of Birmingham. And that's a similar rendering of all the canals, with also the major road network marked out in a paler color. And again, I show you this just to show you that from the same database, you can produce startlingly different maps. A friend of mine did this for an art exhibition. This is called the Inebriant Survey. And this is simply a rendering of all the pubs in Birmingham. No boundary, no roads, nothing else, simply all the pubs. And those of you who know Birmingham might notice in the top right a big gap where Sutton Park is. That's a big National Nature Reserve, and for some reason there's a big cluster where the university is in the south of the city. I still can't quite understand why that might be. We have maps that are produced from OpenStreetMap data, specifically for low resolution mobile devices or handheld GPS devices. This is one. Here's another one. And we have maps that are produced for specific purposes that don't really look like maps at all. This is a map of a canal route with the adjacent features, because I'm assured if you're on a canal boat, all you care about is the canals, the bridges over the canals where you can cross from one side to the other. And as you see here, the road to the nearest supermarket or the nearest pub, and nothing else is really of any import. So that's what's shown on this simple map. But again, the principle is that anybody can take this data because it's open data, and they can render it in any way that suits their purpose. They can add their own data to it. They can choose to include or exclude any part of it. And there are tools that not only show the data, but use the data. So this is a cycling routing tool called Cycle Streets. I use it myself. It's excellent. You put in a start and finish, just like you might with Google Maps, and it shows you one of three routes. And you can choose the fastest route, which will usually be down the busy roads, the slowest, quietest route, which will usually be all the back streets, or a hybrid route. And this, as you can see, is a route in Greenwich in London. It's absolutely marvelous. If you take the slowest, quietest routes when you're in a new town like London, you will see, which is new to me when I visited, you will see things that you never see using public transport or taxis. I've been to all sorts of squares and seen sculptures and statues and muse in London that I'd never have seen before, purely by exploring using this tool. But the point is, this uses the data in OpenStreetMap, and they present it in their own interface on a mobile device. And in fact, one of the interesting things they do with this tool is you can go in on a desktop computer or a laptop, plan your route and save it, and then open it up on your mobile device. So if you need to type in long addresses and so on, you can do that using a proper keyboard on your computer before you go onto your mobile on your bicycle in the rain. There are other mobile tools that allow you to edit OpenStreetMap as you're moving about. This one, named after an Italian cartographer called Vespucci, is very useful for adding data to the map. It's not so good for drawing polygons because, if you're like me, fat fingers and a small mobile screen don't go together very well. But it does allow you to add a name to a shop, or say that a building has been deleted, or add an address, or change the purpose of something quite easily. And when you make an edit on this, it goes straight into the data in the same way, straight into the database in the same way as if you use the actual OpenStreetMap website. And there are a multitude of different editing tools for different purposes. So these are just some examples. One that I'm particularly fond of is called StreetComplete, and I'm afraid this only works in Android. There isn't an iPhone version of it yet, although I hope it's in the pipeline. Two screenshots here, side by side. The one on the left is back to that area of Birmingham called Perry Bar, and it shows you all the issues that StreetComplete has identified. And these are basically questions. And if you tap one of the icons, you get the screenshot on the right. And the icon I tapped here was a bus stop, and it says, is there a shelter at this bus stop? And you can simply answer no or yes, or under other answers you can say things like I can't tell, or it's gone, somebody's knocked it down, or it needs somebody to go and do a closer survey because you can't see from the top of the bus, or whatever it might be. And StreetComplete is very useful if you don't want to get involved with the more technical interfaces for OpenStreetMap, or you're not sure what you're doing with them because you haven't yet been trained or experienced them, or if you just want to do quick changes while you're doing, like I say, on the top of the bus, sitting in the dentist's waiting room, in the park, sitting on a bench waiting for your kids to finish on the swings, whatever it might be, you can use StreetComplete to just add a few facts to the map very quickly. You do need to sign up for an account on the OpenStreetMap website and then use those credentials to sign in on StreetComplete. But other than that, it's completely self-contained, it's fun, and it's quick. So I please urge you all to at least have a go with StreetComplete if you don't do any other OpenStreetMap edits. Do it around your home, where you work, where you go on holiday or for leisure, whatever it might be. I'll just take a sip of water, excuse me. So this is the Google Play Store, and this is the first of about 10 screens of apps for OpenStreetMap that either allow you to edit it or do something with it like cycle routing. And there are the same for iPhones, different apps mainly. Some of them are crossover, but there are a plethora of them. So you need to explore them. There are some reviews on the OpenStreetMap wiki. Some of them are better than others. Some of them carry advertising and some don't. But there are some favorites. They're near the top of the list there. And as I say, on the OpenStreetMap wiki, they are highlighted as well. The wiki, incidentally, is linked from the OpenStreetMap website that I showed you earlier. So how do you make your own maps? Well, there are a number of different ways to produce or buy in tiling. One of these is Mabbett, which is, it says here, is a free desktop application. This allows you to download the data, style it, and produce some tiles. And they produce maps that look like this. This is mashing up some other data into a heat map, or that look like this, and many, many more styles besides. Those are just, again, examples to show you the variance. And they do it with something that looks like this. Now, that's horrendous at the start, but when you look at it a bit more closely, it's very similar to style sheets in HTML. If you've ever done those, you'll pick this up very quickly. And even if you haven't, it'll take you half a day to learn how to do it. You can teach yourself in no time. Very simple, some very good tutorials and some examples on the website, and other people have shared online, which you can download and manipulate and learn to change piece by piece. There is a tool called Leaflet, and again, as it says here, an open source JavaScript library. So if you just want to embed a slippy map using OpenStreetMap data into your website, you can use Leaflet. I understand that it's free for small use, and then it's one of these freemium models if you need it for a massive business to customer service like Amazon, you probably have to pay to use it or host your own. But very simple to get started. And again, lots of examples and tutorials online, as is the open source way. Incidentally, Leaflet is its development has been slowed down considerably. There was a release in April, but the guy who develops it is in Ukraine and obviously has other things on his time. So I hope he's safe and well, and we wish him well for the future. There is Mapbox, which is a large provider of mapping services on a commercial basis. So if you want a business to partner with, they're a pretty good bet. But there are lots of others besides. Again, these are just examples. There is an API on OpenStreetMap, and there is also a third-party API called Overpass, which will produce the outputs listed here, XML, JSON, and so on. So that you can query OpenStreetMap. You can take all the data, you can have data dumps on an incremental basis, you can get data for a selected area of the world, one country or a rectangle or whatever you might need, or you can use the API to write queries and say, you know, give me all the railway stations in the West Midlands, and the API will do that for you. If you don't want to use the API directly, there is this tool called Overpass Turbo, which uses the Overpass API to execute Sparkle-like queries. So in the left-hand panel here, we have a query. In the right-hand panel, you select the area you wish to apply that query to. Now, you can do the whole planet, but it'll basically grind to a halt. So this is a little area in Nottingham, and this particular query is asking for trees. So those are all the trees on this area, or rather, these are all the trees, I think, from the local council. And if you click one of them, you get the data from OpenStreetMap. So there you can see the tags and the values, that this is a taxon Cedrus libani, in other words, a cedar of Lebanon. It's natural tree, it has council reference 0141 and the coordinates and so on. And that's an OpenStreetMap node. So very simple to write those queries. Again, lots of examples that you can play with if you just want to learn how to use it or have an experiment. So the sum total of all the things I've shown you in this section is that OpenStreetMap is an open database of geospatial data. Openness is very much people freely. Everybody who contributes agrees to the terms which places their data under an open license. You are required to give attribution, and people will come after you if you don't and remind you quite pointedly that you should be doing that. But other than that, it's free to use. Now, there are, as I say, people who will provide you with commercial services for some of these things, particularly at scale. But if you want to just play with it, or you have a small use case, it's completely free. And obviously, if you're a hobbyist just playing around with it, it's free as well. So let's go back to the Hall of Memory, that lovely building in Birmingham that I showed you earlier. Where I'm showing it you now is in JOSM, the Java OpenStreetMap editor. And this is the power tool for OpenStreetMap editors. This is what I use for most of my mapping when I'm not using StreetComplete as I walk around. Excuse me. So as I say, this is a power tool. It has an easy mode to get started, but it also has a very complex mode. And like the Japanese game of Go, I learned to use it quite quickly, but I've never mastered it, and I probably never will. There are so many different things. You think of it as Photoshop for maps, if you like, or for map data. So what you see on the left is the roughly crucifoid polygon for the Hall of Memory in Birmingham. It's highlighted red, and in the top right hand pane you see all the tags and values. So the one that's highlighted in blue is the architect, SN Cook and WN Twist. It's building heritage, heritage grade 2, and so on, as I said earlier. I'll just expand that panel so you can see it there, and I'm going to talk you through a few of these things. So as we skip through, we have the English heritage reference number. So this is a listed building, and it has that number 46884 on English Heritage. Now, we don't store that as a URI because English Heritage and other organizations use that value as a slug in a number of different URIs. So elsewhere, we store the patterns that those values can be put into to make a URI. And then we can go to pages like this one. So there's the same value in the URI, and this is the Images of England website. So it's not the listing entry that English Heritage or Historic England nowadays have. This is a slightly old slide, as you can see. It's the old the old English Heritage logo. But this is one of the websites that we link out to using that ID. We do, oh, excuse me, we do store some URLs or URIs. So this is the home page for the Hall of Memory in the organisation that looks after it, Birmingham City Council. And there's the web page on Birmingham City Council's website about the Hall of Memory. So we link out to that. And here is the identifier for this item in Wikidata. And this is the page in Wikidata for the Hall of Memory. Now, if you haven't come across Wikidata, this is another topic on which I could give you a whole talk, and indeed often do give talks on. Wikidata is a sister project for Wikipedia, and it is a repository of linked open data. So on the Hall of Memory, we have an item for the architect S.N. Cook as a link, and we link to another Wikidata item about Cook. We say that it's in the United Kingdom, and we link to a Wikidata item about United Kingdom, where we store facts about the United Kingdom, and so on. And you can see there the English Heritage List number that I showed you earlier is also included. Wikidata, as I say, is a sister project to Wikipedia, like OpenStreetMap. It's all free and completely reusable. It's something you will need to know about and should be using in your work, probably. And it's something I'll be happy to talk to you about at length in future. It is the world's largest repository of open data, we believe. It has millions and millions of items about geographical objects like buildings and cities and towns, but also about people and products and goods, scientific publications and academic journals, famous animals, planets and asteroids, spacecraft and aircraft, makes of cars, you name it, it's in Wikidata. We have concepts like love and hate as well, anything that has a Wikipedia article and much more besides. So we link out from OpenStreetMap to Wikidata on a one-to-one basis. There are reciprocal links as well sometimes. And then Wikidata links out into the wider linked open data world. So it links to the architect, and then it links to the architect's spouse and the university where the architect trained, and so on. I'll come back to that. So this is the same structure, the Hall of Memory in Birmingham. This is in the OpenStreetMap website that I showed you earlier, but this is what it looks like when you go into the editing mode, or rather the viewing mode for a specific object. I'm not logged in, so I can't actually edit it in this view, but it's very similar. And here on the left-hand side, again, you can see the tags for this object. So once you know the ID of the node or the way or the relation, you can view all the tags using the OpenStreetMap website. In other words, via the map page that I showed you earlier. So not only do we store the Wikidata ID of the Hall of Memory, but we store the Wikidata ID of that item about the architect. And if I move on, here is a little extract of that Wikidata item about the architect that I mentioned earlier. And you can see there we've got 3 identifiers in 3 other linked databases, one of which is the VIAF, the Virtual Internet Authority file, which is the combination of library catalogs from around the globe, Freebase, the Union List of Artist Names, which is artists and architects and so on, and many more besides. So again, we're linking out to all these other things. Now, there is a dichotomy of opinions in the OpenStreetMap community as to how much of this data should go directly into OpenStreetMap and how much should go into Wikidata. Or indeed, there's perhaps not a dichotomy so much as a range of views. So we might link to the Wikidata item about the architect from the item about the building, or we might just link to the item about the building and let the item on Wikidata link to the item about the architect. You can do it either way. But we certainly won't link out to all the things about the architect from the OpenStreetMap entry. You do need Wikidata for that. So very much an intermeshing of different linked open databases there. So here's another news flash for you. Not only is OpenStreetMap open geospatial data, but it's open linked geospatial data using either URIs or values that can go into URIs, which make it linked data. And who uses OSM? Well, anyone can use it, but some pretty big organizations. So Microsoft are using it. Bing Maps, which is Microsoft's rival to Google Maps, uses a lot of OpenStreetMap data and data from other sources, but they're moving their own geospatial processing for business to business and business to customer to OpenStreetMap. They've done it in Australia and South America, and they're now looking specifically at UK, but rolling that out across Europe and then the rest of the world. So pretty big player. Facebook, or Meta as we must now call them, are using OpenStreetMap for their mapping. Amazon make use of it. They make use of it for delivery purposes, obviously, and for others. Apple and Apple Maps, which is again Apple's rival to Google Maps, uses a lot of OpenStreetMap data. And a lot of the major GIS players are using the data in their own mapping or map-like products. So Ordnance Survey uses it in a lot of their consumer products alongside Ordnance Survey data. And believe it or not, Google Maps. We sort of have a love-hate relationship with Google Maps, but they use a lot of our data as well in certain parts of the world. Some of the areas they don't need it, in others it's the only mapping data that's available. The public sector use it a lot. There are councils and health authorities in this country and similar around the world who are now using OpenStreetMap to produce the maps on their website and for back-end mapping data and so on. Lots of large and small commercial businesses and anyone else, hobbyists, individuals, anybody with an interest can make use of OpenStreetMap. There's a wonderful site called Open Benches where you can upload pictures of memorial benches with the site will transcribe the inscription and you say where it is, and they use OpenStreetMap data, for instance. And who edits OpenStreetMap? Well, volunteers. I've been editing, as I said earlier, since 2009. I've already invited you to have a go, and I sincerely hope you will get your toes wet. Try StreetComplete or log into the main website or download JOSM and have a go at editing some data around you. Make sure your house is on there and it's got the postcode and house number in there. Not so much in the UK or mapping the UK, but Humanitarian OpenStreetMap is an organisation which does mapping in areas of urgent need. So earthquake zones, famine zones, war areas, or after wars. Humanitarian OpenStreetMap has people around the world, including in the UK, who will go and improve the mapping, but they also employ people to go into those areas and help the local people to map whatever has changed as a result of the disaster or whatever needs to be added for the first time. They work with aid agencies. Aid agencies were printing out OpenStreetMap on paper and taking it with them, but now we take laptops and tablets in and help people get online and show them how to map in their own community. Amazon do a lot of additions to OpenStreetMap. They use GPS on their vehicles, so if they've got somebody driving to deliver to a farm in the outback of Australia, they will use the GPS from that delivery to then add the delivery route for future use. And they have paid staff whose job it is to update OpenStreetMap. Apple, again, so that the quality of their mapping is improved. Facebook and Meta. Uber have 2,500 people who are paid full or part-time to edit OpenStreetMap around the world. Again, using GPS from some of their vehicles. Probably not so much in the UK and the USA and other countries, but in countries where there is no existing mapping or no state mapping function, no freely available maps. And the public sector, again, I know of local authorities and health authorities in this country who've added their own data, their own area. So a health authority might want to add all the clinics and GP surgeries and pharmacies. A public authority might want to add new roads and new house builds, make sure the names are correct. Highways agencies might want to add road closures or long-term diversions. We don't bother to map a 2-day closure, but if you're closing the road for 9 months, we might well mark it as closed in OpenStreetMap so the data is up to date. And I'm told, as of yesterday, about 10% of the edits in the UK for OpenStreetMap are from these sorts of paid mappers. So why would you use OSM in your business? Well, one is accuracy. I showed you right at the beginning how the park near where I live is much better mapped in OpenStreetMap. All the individual paths and bridges and benches are in there. We have a postal address project, which OpenCage Data, Meta, and the other organisations listed on this slide have funded with us specifically for the UK. So we're building a repository within OpenStreetMap of open address data. We talked about this morning about how the Royal Mail have a monopoly on the address data. It was sold off when Royal Mail was sold off criminally, in my view, and is no longer public. So we're building our own, and these organisations and others are helping us to do that. So if you have address data that is not tainted by having come from Royal Mail, in other words, if you've done your own surveys, you have your own delivery people who can add to it, then you can put this data into OpenStreetMap and help us. But it will all be available in OpenStreetMap, so it will be queryable and downloadable once it's complete. We're getting there. There's a lot in there already, a lot more to do. OpenStreetMap is good at timeliness. A few years ago, they built a new bypass in South Birmingham, and the mayor came along in his limo and cut the ribbon and opened it. And one of my friends was on his mobile phone standing next to the mayor and said, "Okay, it's open." And somebody pressed a button on their computer, and OpenStreetMap was updated to change it from an under construction highway to an in-use highway. It took about 6 weeks for Google to update, and even longer for Ordnance Survey to update, I believe. We don't always do it quite that quickly, but usually major things like that get added within the day. I've demonstrated the flexibility of OpenStreetMap. You can include or exclude whatever data you want from the database. You can style it however you want it. You can host it wherever you want it. And its privacy is copper plate. So unlike Google, you're not passing your clients and your customers' interests and data over to a commercial organization like Google, but you're either keeping it yourself or you're not having it at all. And there is cost saving. And there are commercial services, but some of this is free to use. You're not having to pay Google all the time to keep renewing a subscription. And there is a website, switchtoosm.org, which explains some of these principles in more detail and tells you how to get started. So I think I can say that if we can do all those things, if we can get Meta and Microsoft and Apple and even Ordnance Survey and Google Maps using our data, we can say it's mature open linked geospatial data. It's not complete. It's not fully up to date. It's like Wikipedia. People are adding to it all the time, but it's getting better all the time, and it's constantly being updated as things changes. So as buildings get demolished, as shops close and reopen under a different name or a different owner selling different things, it all gets added into OpenStreetMap. You can help with that as an individual. Your organization can help with that as a supplier of data, and you can make use of that data. It's all there for you, and it's completely free unless you want to pay somebody to do some of the grunt work for you. So that ends my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions. My contact details are here. If you want to be rude about me on Twitter, that's how you can do that. And I'm a consultant, so it's compulsory for me to tell you that I'm available. If you want help with any of this, if you want help with Wikidata or Wikipedia, I'm happy to come and talk to you about those things as well. So thank you for your time. I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll answer your questions.
Thanks, Andy. That was really good.
Thank you.
We do have some time for questions, so please post them in the Q&A there, Q&A even. Just before we go into the questions, just a reminder that tomorrow we've got more talk starting at 11 with Ofwat Open Data Strategy, and then in the afternoon at 4 again, adopting a security-minded approach to open data, and you can sign up for those at the same link that you used to get to this one. So, Andy, I don't know how you get by on your bicycle when you're adding to your OpenStreetMap the whole time. I mean, you must be stopping every 5 minutes to add more data.
It can get that way. You have to be disciplined with it. I went out shopping a while ago and I got back quite late, and my family said, "Where the hell have you been?" And I said, "But there's a new housing estate and nobody's mapped it." Yeah, you have to be judicious with it. But I feel an awful lot of dead time with it. I mean, like I say, on the bus or on the train or sitting in waiting rooms. I once said at a conference, got a laugh for it, that you can even use StreetComplete if you want to watch television with your loved one and they're watching some terrible program that you can't stand. You can have one arm around them and the other one you can be adding yes and no answers into StreetComplete. I don't know whether you get away with it, but it's certainly worth a try.
So anyway, we've got some questions here coming in, and the question I had, and it's repeated really by Jenny Andrew, is about the assurance of the data coming in that you're using. I mean, the question here is, any tips for what organizations should look for as markers of authoritative data sources when they consider using open linked data in general? How do you assure authority?
I can't answer that in general, or at least I'm not going to today, but I'll answer it from an OpenStreetMap point of view. which is we import data into OpenStreetMap, but we have a rigorous process of vetting it. So anybody who wants to do an import of data has to propose it to the community generally, and specifically in the geographical area if it's data about a specific city or county or a state in the US or whatever it might be. And then we kick the tires a lot. So we look, is it really under an open license? Do the people who are licensing understand open licensing, and they haven't just used Ordnance Survey or other closed data and said it's under an open license when it shouldn't be? And how robust and up to date is the data? So somebody a while ago proposed importing a load of public transport data in their own country. I forget where it was overseas. And somebody pointed out it was 8 years old and more out of date than what was already in OpenStreetMap. So that proposal was rejected. So it's crowdsourcing is how OpenStreetMap does it. Now, if you're a company and you're looking to use data from other organizations or the government, that probably won't apply. You'll have to do your own due diligence. But in OpenStreetMap, we rely on the crowd, as we do for individual contributions as well. So if I see another question coming up, which somebody says, how do you prevent people adding bad data? Well, we don't prevent them adding it necessarily, but we check it when it's been added. So everything anybody does is checked by other people. And it's then undone or removed if it's bad. Now, sometimes that's through naivety. They're an individual who wants to help and is just learning the ropes and they've made a mistake. Sometimes it's over eagerness. Sometimes it's spam because they've come in to add their mail order business as an object on the map, even though it doesn't actually have a physical presence. And sometimes it's out and out disruptive vandalism and the account gets blocked. And Touchwood were very good at that. So again, I use Wikipedia as a model. People often say OpenStreetMap is the Wikipedia of maps, and it works in very much the same way. And it sounds as though it wouldn't work, but in practice it does. And I should also add, by the way, that it's not run by Wikipedia or the Wikimedia Foundation. I mentioned Wikidata earlier, which is part of the Wikipedia family, and there are various other projects that are. OpenStreetMap isn't. There are a lot of overlaps in terms of the individuals who are active in the community, and a lot of overlaps in terms of how we use each other's data. So all the maps in Wikipedia come from OpenStreetMap, for instance, come from OpenStreetMap data. Wikimedia makes its own tiles. But there's an organization called the OpenStreetMap Foundation who host OpenStreetMap and host the OpenStreetMap website and administer the funds and apply for grants and things like that. Having said that, the amount of money involved for an object of its type or for a project of its type is minuscule. I think it's 100 grand a year or something like that it costs to run everything.
And that's funded by donations or?
Yeah, some of the big commercial partners, so people like Facebook and Apple and Microsoft put some money in because they see it as valuable, and there are some charitable foundations, and there's a subscription model for members and of the members of the foundation. You don't have to subscribe to edit the map or be part of that community, and individual donations. Some people will just put a tenner a month in or whatever because they like it.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
Sorry, I've answered half the questions in the Q&A already, so I'm doing your job for you.
No, we'll keep going. The next one from Babatundi is about switch to OSM. Does that have coverage across developing countries like Africa, because Google already have this leverage?
Well, OSM has coverage. Switch to OSM is specifically about how you can use OSM maps instead of Google Maps or other maps in your websites or your projects. So that's global. But OSM has coverage across the globe. Obviously, it's better in some areas than others. There are some parts of sub-Saharan South Africa where the mapping is where we were here 10 years or more ago. But the foundation puts resources into those areas in terms of training and facilitating community meetups, and works with other organizations that do outreach and help people to get online, works with schools that can put people into the internet and so on, to try to ensure that equity. And we're also very good, I think, perhaps we could be better, but we certainly try to empower local communities. So the decision about mapping in the Sudan is made by and large by the mapping community in the Sudan. It's not made by people in London or Birmingham or Munich or New York.
So do you have to provide, or do you provide sort of training for organizations like that, or how do they get up to speed with the technology?
Well, personally, I provide training on a consultancy basis. I also do some voluntary work in that field, depending on the organisation and its type. And there are volunteers in the community who do the same sort of thing. So there are get-togethers where individuals can come along and meet other mappers and be taught.
Yeah.
We sometimes work with other organisations. I've done some work with Open Data Manchester, for instance, where they held an open event for people in Manchester to come along, and I taught them how to map. We've done similar things, I think, with the ODI in London and others. And it happens around the world. There are conferences that people who are interested in OpenStreetMap can attend. You can either buy a ticket or you can apply for grant funding from the foundation or other people to come to them. And there are people who will do it commercially. So, you know, if Microsoft wants to buy some more OpenStreetMap training, they've probably got it in-house now, but when they need it, they can pay for it. If the Red Cross or a bunch of interested individuals in Manchester or whatever it is want to learn how to map, then somebody like me or somebody else will volunteer to teach them. I've even done it for a tip jar with a bunch of friends before now.
Yeah. Okay, we got a couple of more questions here. There's one question about statistical data and how the data within OpenStreetMap can be collected and reported and you know, run through languages to do analytics.
Yeah, so all the data in OpenStreetMap is freely available. So if somebody wants to do something and find out what the density of street trees in Birmingham is compared to Manchester or compared to Sydney or New York, they can do that. If they want to count the number of edits that are made in their hometown, they can do that. If they want to see which cities in the world have the most active OpenStreetMap editors, they can do that. And there are already tools that will do this. So for instance, there's a heat map tool where you can put in your username and it will show you where in the world you've done the most editing. So for me, it's obviously around my home and where I've worked, but also the cities around the world where I've visited. I usually try and do a little bit of mapping just to put my mark on the map. And I've got a few edits around the world at places I've never visited because I've helped people to fix technical problems.
Yeah. And you see local authorities doing that kind of thing to try and understand their neighbourhood better?
They certainly could do. I'm not aware of any examples, but there's no reason why they couldn't if they were interested.
Okay. So another technical question here from Babatunde about level of security for data on OpenStreetMap, and I guess that depends on where the data is actually hosted and
well, the data is on a server which has all the usual firewalls and professional level security you would expect, and I'm not familiar with the ins and outs of it, and we wouldn't talk about some of it because obviously you need to protect it. So that applies. As an individual, we keep data secure, so we use HTTPS, so other people can't see what you've done or said unless you make it public. People can't see what you've viewed on the map. If you need to type in your local, I don't know, your local fertility or sex clinic or whatever it might be to find out how to get there, nobody else is going to know you've done that unless you tell them.
So it's anonymous in that sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's a question here about, I'm not sure I understand the questions, but you might better. How is OSM specifically useful between businesses? You know, maybe between.
Well, how is a map specifically useful between businesses? And then this one is free compared to the ones that you have to pay for, and this one is reliable compared to the ones that are trying to sell you advertising, and this one is timely compared to the ones that don't get updated in 6 months or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So if you have a need for mapping or for route finding data, then OSM will be as useful as other maps, if not more useful.
Yeah. So we that's all the questions from the Q&A. I've got a couple of points if you don't mind. I mean,
not at all.
You've been involved in open data for a long time, and how have things changed really in that time? What are the major changes that you've seen between you know, when you first started in this world and where we are now?
Well, I'll hark back a little bit to the talk that John gave this morning and echo what he said, that there is the good, the bad, and the ugly. So some stuff has been more available, some is becoming less available. Some of the data that we've got for OpenStreetMap we've got through using freedom of information requests, and some organizations have become more they become less keen to answer and less helpful when answering queries and more obstructive. I'm not going to name names, but some of them have. And some organizations that used to release data openly have stopped doing it, which is very disappointing. And government itself has become, in my experience, less good at both promoting and opening up its own data, and not just its data but its content. So the number 10 Flickr account with all the pictures of what the Prime Minister and the other cabinet members did today, which was always a useful source of pictures for Wikipedia, used to be under an open license, and now it's not.
Yeah.
But having said that, there is the open government license and we get some stuff that way. But there is this, it's a constant struggle to explain to people what it's about, or to explain to organizations what it's about, and to get them to open up and to keep stuff open. So some organizations will say, yeah, well, that's a great idea. Here's some open data. And then the individual moves on, or there's a budget cut, and then they forget all about it. So you have to keep going back and having the same conversations with new people again and again. Yeah. I get that with local authorities around where I live, from personal experience.
The culture of the organisation has changed, doesn't it? In that sense, that
there's a lot more pressure on everybody, I suppose, a lot of financial and work pressure. So it's understandable, but it's disappointing.
I did wonder whether the kind of the recognition of the value of data, which certainly is kind of, that recognition has increased over the last 5-6 years. Does that impact?
Yeah, I think there are more organisations who are using open data. There are certainly more organisations using OpenStreetMap data. I gave you a list earlier, and some big players. And there are more individuals who get it. So there are more individuals contributing to OpenStreetMap. There are more individuals who know what you mean when you say open data, although we've still got a long way to go in terms of getting into the public consciousness. It's still very much a geeky thing for a lot of people.
Thanks, Andy. Last question from me then. So has open data come of age?
Yes. But like anybody who's come of age, it's not necessarily fully mature.
It's in its teen years.
I remember when I was 21, if you want to take that as coming of age, it was a milestone, and I was certainly different to how I was when I was 14. But I was very naive in some areas, and I got a lot to learn about some things. And I think open data is like an 18-year-old or a 21-year-old. It's grown up and come of age, but it's still got a long way to go.
All right. Well, listen, the talk will be posted onto the BCS website, and thanks once again for your presentation and answering those questions. And
thank you. Can I just draw attention to a comment I've noticed in the chat from Martin Newman, for which I'm very grateful. I showed the Images of England website, and he's caught me out because I'm using some old slides that I've updated for this presentation, and the Images of England website has been merged into the main historic England website now, so that doesn't exist, but the principle is the same. You can use those identifiers for a variety of different web services. So apologies that the slide was out of date. Thank you for Martin for correcting me, but don't lose sight of the wood for the trees.
Excellent. All right, thank you very much, Andy. Thanks everybody.
Thank you everybody else.